Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Influence Economy podcast. I'm your host, Shayna Davis, and I'm glad you're here. But before we get started, I would love if you would do me a favor. So, wherever you are listening to this episode, I want you to take a screenshot. And with that screenshot, I want you to post it on LinkedIn and tag me here at Shayna Rattler Davis. And then I just want to hear your biggest aha moment or your biggest takeaway from this episode. And the reason why I do that is because there are so many leaders these days that they don't necessarily know how to cultivate and build the external presence and influence that is actually going to be required in order to win in this next decade. And the more times that these episodes are shared, the more people that will be equipped with those strategies to help build those signals that are going to be so important. So thank you so much for being willing to share. So I want to talk to you about something that I've been thinking a lot about lately. For the past few decades, like at least 3 decades, maybe even 4 decades, we've been fed like this narrow, outdated idea of what executive presence is supposed to look like. Like, you know, the type like a sharp suit and a steady voice and eye contact and charisma and confidence. And oh, I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it, right? Like, so basically, like how you carry yourself in the room. But let's be honest, I don't think that definition is valid anymore. I think it's toast, to be honest with you. Because if we think about the business climate that we're operating in right now, with talent shortages, trust erosion, and just the constant technological disruption that we're finding ourselves in, executive presence can't, it just can no longer be about how we show up in the room. It has to be about how we show up in the world. What is the perception that we're creating in the outside world? And that shift, it's the shift of what I'm referring to as executive presence 4.0. But before we dive into what that looks like, I want to take a second to rewind and actually see how we got here because executive presence, it didn't always mean what it means today. In fact, the way that like leadership visibility, like visibility is a term that I didn't hear a lot about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But when we think about leadership visibility and how it's evolved, it actually tells us a lot about what's happening right now. So I want to break that down. I want to start with what I would consider to have been executive presence 1.0. Back in the day, like if you think about like in the IBM area, those kind of blue chip companies, the company was the brand. And leaders were basically invisible. Like no one cared who the CEO was as long as the company was stable, credible, and delivering results. The institutional reputation that that company had, it did all of the heavy lifting. Like if you think about it right now, and I did a poll of this not that long ago, many of us did, we don't even know who the CEOs were of of those companies if we didn't Google their name, because it was all about the logo and not necessarily the leadership. The brand carried everything. And then came Steve Jobs. Like I think about that of like executive presence 2.0. And when Steve Jobs came on the scene, it was a whole new model where the CEO became the face of the company. And suddenly, leadership visibility was no longer optional, it was strategic. The leader wasn't just the behind the scenes operator, they were the brand. So you think about Elon Musk, Oprah, Jeff Bezos. The company's culture, their values, and the future were interpreted through that one high profile individual. Unless you were looking at the company closely, you may not have even known who some of the other core leaders were. And it was a huge leap forward in terms of visibility, but still, it was all about one person at the top. And then you get to today, where I consider that to be executive presence 3.0. Today, we're inching into the next phase. We're starting to see smart companies realize that the CEO cannot carry all of the weight. External influence has to be distributed. It's no longer just about the visionary at the helm, it's about the HR director, the CTO, the head of product, the head of engineering. Like leaders who traditionally stayed behind the scenes are now all of a sudden expected to speak publicly, show thought leadership, and build credibility. But the problem is that most of them just are not developed in that way. Like look at NVIDIA. NVIDIA CEO I think it's Jensen Wong. I may be pronouncing his name wrong. But like, yes, like he's a brilliant technologist, but what really sets him apart is how he translates complex ideas and influence across multiple audiences. And he's not alone, because you'll notice that his entire leadership team reinforces the company's presence and credibility in a public way. They're not, just like hiding behind the brand, they're adding to it. But here's the problem with that. While 3.0 is where the market is clearly heading, most companies aren't there yet. They're still stuck in 2.0, still relying on the CEO to be the sole external signal. Like they might loop in a comms person. Maybe the founder does a LinkedIn post once a quarter. They're relying just on the business development, marketing, and sales people to do all of the heavy lifting, but it's inconsistent and it's outdated. That's the gap. That's the competency gap. And it's costing companies more than they realize. I did an entire episode last week of what it's costing us if our leaders are not visible and credible. It's costing companies more than they realize. So, this next era that I'm considering to be executive presence 4.0, that's where things get interesting, because executive presence 4.0, it isn't just about distributing visibility, it's about designing it. It's about creating a coordinated, intentional broadcast across your whole entire leadership team, where every single leader knows how to show up externally, build trust, and signal value in a way that strengthens the company's reputation. Your leaders are no longer just operators of the business. They are external signals of credibility, culture, and authority. And here's the thing, it's not just theoretical. This is already happening, whether it's an investor meeting, a media interview, a podcast appearance, a LinkedIn post, maybe a comment on someone else's LinkedIn post. Every single touch point is a signal. And that signal, it either builds trust or it chips away at it. And to do this well, you need three core elements working together. Element number one is leadership identity. When you think about your leaders, what do they stand for? What are they known for? This is about thought leadership, narrative, owning a point of view. And it's not just about the point of view of the company. It's not just the company's values and what it is that the company is selling. If your executives can't clearly articulate their value and what they believe in, the market won't be able to either. Number two is leadership branding. How are your leaders showing up visually? This includes everything from their photos online, their bios, their social profiles. Ask yourself, look at the top three leaders that are visible in your organization. Are those visual cues? Are they sending consistent things that are consistent with the company's positioning and values? And then number three is leadership messaging. Can your leaders clearly communicate complex ideas in a way that resonates? Can they speak to investors, media, customers, future employees in language that builds clarity and confidence? Just got a new dog and he's chiming in, clearly over here in the background. When these three signals, leadership identity, leadership branding, and leadership messaging, when they're aligned, you're no longer just building personal brands. Although, even though if you work for a brand, you're still a brand inside of that company. But what you're building is a leadership system that shapes how people trust and engage with your entire company. And I just want to be clear, I'm not talking about fluff. I'm talking about a performance strategy, because what's happening externally right now at the time of this recording is no joke. Talent wars are raging, and top performers, they want to work for leaders that they represent, not companies that they've never heard of before or that they can only talk about the company, right? Like, what is the leaders? Like, the trust gaps, they're widening. People are skeptical of brands. They're skeptical of everyone, everything. They're skeptical of AI. But what they will believe is a credible, visible leader. Tech disruption is everywhere. And if your team can't translate innovation into a story the market can understand, you're not just, you're not behind only, but you're invisible. And when leaders lack the ability to signal value externally, you don't just lose visibility, you lose talent, you lose investor confidence, you lose customers. But when you close that competency gap, when your entire leadership bench becomes fluent in external influence, everything shifts. Talent attraction becomes easier, your credibility goes up, stakeholders feel more confident, you stop being vulnerable to competitor poaching, fundraising even gets more smoother. You move from a one voice company to like a surround sound brand where every leader amplifies the same story from their own lane with clarity and consistency. So the question I'll leave you with is this. If IBM defined 1.0 and Steve Jobs defined 2.0 and Jensen Huang is modeling 3.0, who's going to define 4.0? It's not going to be the flashiest founder or the most charismatic CEO. It's going to be the organizations that intentionally develop a new type of leadership competency where every leader knows who they are, what they stand for, and how to show up. Because executive presence is not just about the individual anymore, it's about the collective. And the companies that get that, that truly embrace Executive Presence 4.0, are the ones that will win the next decade of trust, talent, and market leadership. So if you want to be sure that your company is at the forefront of Executive Presence 4.0, just DM me here on LinkedIn at Shayna Rattler Davis and let's get you on the right track, because the cost of remaining in 3.0 or worse, because many organizations are still in 2.0, is way too high of a risk. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode, that you will share it, and that you will go back and listen to future and previous episodes as well. Everyone have a great day. Bye bye.